Israel's Dead Sea Fault awakens with an earthquake swarm, and there are now warnings from scientists. All the way from the north, that is from South Syria, all the way to the Dead Sea. This whole area from north to south is a fault line. The Dead Sea Transform DST fault system, also sometimes referred to as the Dead Sea Rift, is a series of faults that run from the Maras Triple Junction, a junction in the East Anatolian Fault of southeast Turkey, to the northern end of the Red Sea Rift, that is just offshore of the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. The fault system from the transform boundary between the African plate to the west and the Arabian plate to the east, it's a zone of left lateral displacement, signifying the relative motions of the two plates. Both plates are moving in a general north-northeast direction, but the Arabian plate is moving faster, resulting in the observed left lateral motions along the fault of approximately 107 kilometers. A component of extension is also present at the southern part of this transform, the Dead Sea Transform, which has contributed to a series of depressions or pull-apart basins from the Gulf of Aqaba, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, and Hula basins. Tectonic interpretation. The Dead Sea Transform fault system is generally considered to be a transform fault that has accommodated a 105-kilometer northward displacement of the Arabian plate. This interpretation is based on observation of offset markers such as river terraces, gullies, and architectural features, giving horizontal slip rates of several millimeters per year over the last few million years. GPS data give similar rates of present-day movement of the Arabian plate relative to the African plate, and it's also been proposed that the fault zone is a rift system that is incipient oceanic spreading center, the northern extension of the Red Sea Rift. Now that's basically the general information on this. The geology and evolution of the southern Dead Sea Fault, with emphasis on the subsurface structure. The Dead Sea Fault is an active transform fault linking opening to the Red Sea with collision in the Taurus-Zagros Mountains. Motion is left lateral and estimated about 5 to 7 millimeters per year. The fault is seismically active and can be divided into two distinct structural segments. The southern segment, based mainly on the wealth of geophysical data and owing to tension caused by oblique slip and the overlapping of echelon fault strands, a series of pull-apart basins were formed along the fault's length. These basins are long and deep, reaching in places more than 10 kilometers deep. They are characterized by extensional, compressional, and asymmetrical structures, varying in size from large scale, that is defining the general structure of the Dead Sea Fault Valley, to small scale, defining the internal structure. And the Dead Sea Fault awakens with earthquake swarms. These have been taking place the past few weeks. At the start of the month in the Sea of Galilee, in the north of Israel, a small swarm of earthquakes occurred, resulting in minor shaking felt all around Israel. While there was no major damage from the quakes, the largest of which was a magnitude 4.7 according to the USGS, it provided a wake-up call to a region that could experience moderate magnitude quakes, which could have a significant impact on the area. Let's remember that there are still there is a large amount of old structures in Israel, especially in Jerusalem, for example, where the old city of Jerusalem is all buildings basically from the Byzantine era, about 1,000 years old, up to 2,000 or 3,000 years old. A lot of the old city is areas where, for example, our Lord Jesus Christ passed and lived. Now, and these, of course, are built on older structures that were thousands of years older than that. In total, at the start of the month, there were over 60 small to moderate magnitude earthquakes at the northern end of the Sea of Galilee. This is a part of Israel that has similar swarms, including back in 2013, as well as larger magnitudes, more damaging quakes. Now, the Geological Survey of Israel, the location says of the recent earthquakes as well as similar swarm in 2013 are shown. All of these events appear to have occurred on the Dead Sea Transform Fault, the left lateral strike-slip fault system extending from the Gulf of Aqaba in the south all the way to the north past Syria to southern Turkey. This fault accommodates the motion between the Arabian and the African plates, as we said, and has been responsible for historic large, damaging earthquakes. In addition to being the cause of both large and small earthquakes, this Dead Sea Transform Fault also helped form both the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea to the south. And of course, the Jordan River flows along the fault line, the depression. The river, the water from the Sea of Galilee flows all along, the fresh water from the Sea of Galilee, watering all the, transversing through all of Israel and emptying in the Dead Sea. Passing through the Dead Sea, emptying in the Red Sea. So all of this is the fault line. The Dead Sea Transform helped form the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea to the south. Both of these seas are known as pull-apart basins, and they're the result of the extension along the transform. It's common with most continental strike-slip faults. The Dead Sea Transform is segmented, which means earthquake ruptures tend to be limited by structural discontinuities. Despite the magnitude 6+ earthquakes that are still possible to take place there and have happened in the last century, in 1927, a 6 magnitude earthquake struck just north of the Dead Sea, resulting in significant damage in numerous cities, including Jerusalem. Of course, they had very old buildings at that time. Around 300 people were killed, and going even further back, 2 more earthquakes in the region in 1837 and in 1033 also struck along segments of the Dead Sea Transform and are shown in the map. This fault must be recognized as posing a significant threat to the region. Our Lord Jesus Christ also gave the prophecy as to what will be taking place here in the end times. This is also the prophecy in Zechariah 14:4 that I'm going to read to you. The destroyers of Jerusalem destroyed. It says here, Zechariah 14:3. Then the Lord will go out to fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem, and the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, from a great valley with half the mountain moving to the north and half to the south. You will flee by my mountain valley, for it will extend to Azel. You will flee as you fled from the earthquakes in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. So we seeing here, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives east of Jerusalem. That's the Mount of Olives across from Kidron Valley. We know Jerusalem is, let's say if we're looking north, Jerusalem is to our left. Then we have the depression of the Kidron Valley. And then we have on the right side the Mount of Olives. And the Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, forming a great valley with half the mountain moving north and half to south. Can you imagine? So it's a prophecy that has not yet happened. The Dead Sea prophecy, that is. Revelation 16:6 also says, and he gathered them together into a place in the Hebrew tongue called Armageddon. 16:18 says, they were voices, thunders, lightnings. It was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. According to Geological Review, found that one of the strongest fault lines runs right through the valley of Megiddo, but the most interesting one runs right through the city of Jerusalem today. And then we have read already Zechariah 14:4. The Geological Institute in Tel Aviv discovered a major fault line running right through the Mount of Olives. It takes a line from Mount Olives over to the Kidron Valley all the way into the valley of Hinnom. The fault line follows the Kidron Brook, which empties into the Dead Sea. Zechariah 14:8 says, and it shall be in that day that living waters shall go out from Jerusalem, half of them towards the former sea, and half of them towards the hinder sea. In summer and in winter shall it be. Now there has to be a great source of water under Jerusalem so that this prophecy can be fulfilled. Under the cisterns of the Zion church there are pools of water, so much so that when they drain the water, it returns within 3 days to between 2 and 3 feet deep. The water is there and the fault line is there, so we can see how physically this prophecy can be fulfilled in our time. Ezekiel 47:1. Afterwards he brought me again into the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from underneath the threshold of the house eastward, for the forefront of the house stood towards the east, and the waters came down from the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. I'll leave a link for you concerning the Dead Sea prophecies, and you can read the remainder. There's quite a list here for you to read. Isaiah, Ezekiel, and there's very nice pictures as well. The desert blooming like a rose. Huge farms now use this water for irrigation. Now we know that we have the very special and blessed Gihon Spring, the fountain of the Virgin in the Kidron Valley. This was the main source of water for the pool of Siloam in the city of David, the original site of Jerusalem, one of the world's major intermittent springs, and a reliable water source that made human settlement possible in ancient Jerusalem. The spring was not only used for drinking water, but also initially for irrigating the gardens of the adjacent Kidron Valley, which provided a food source, of course, for the ancient settlement there. The spring rises in the cave 20 feet by 7. Being intermittent, it requires the excavation of the pool of Siloam, which stored the large amount of water needed for the town when the spring was not flowing. The spring has the singular characteristic of being intermittent, flowing from 3 to 5 times daily in the winter, twice daily in the summer, and only once daily in autumn. This peculiarity is accounted for by the supposition that the outlet from the reservoir is by a passage in the form of a siphon. The spring is under the control of the Israeli settler organization David Foundation, Elad, sometimes used by the Jewish men as a sort of mikvah, a ritual, religious, holy bathing, spiritual bathing, cleansing, before a type of a confession. So this is the peculiarity of the Gihon Springs, the underwater fountains, having to do, of course, with fault lines. I'll leave a link below for you for all this.